Hello, good morning, and welcome to PST 2012. I am Denzel, a PhD scholar from IIIT Delhi, India. I will present my work titled What Anyone Could Know About You from Twitter. This work was jointly done with Ashish Sureka, Assistant Professor at IIIT, and Raghav Sethi, an undergraduate student at IIIT Delhi. Let's get started. There has been an explosion of social media websites on the internet in the past decade. Here are some mind boggling numbers. Facebook has more than 500 million active users, while Twitter has more than 140 million active users. There is also a rise in niche or use case based social networking websites. Some examples are Foursquare, a location sharing service, Last.fm, music sharing, YouTube for video sharing, and Flickr, a photo sharing website. Social is no longer a buzzword, but an integral part of the internet. Therefore, users have profiles on multiple social networks to address their various use cases. For example, you can find me on Foursquare because it's one of the best location based social networks out there. You can also find me on Flickr as it caters to my needs of sharing photographs to my friends. And I'm also on YouTube because, well, this video needs to be uploaded on YouTube for me to make my presentation public. But I find maintaining multiple profiles on each social network a bit tedious. So I link these profiles together, which allows me to share content across social network and enhance my social experience. Here's an example. As you can see on the left hand side, YouTube provides an option to connect your YouTube accounts to other social networks like Twitter and Facebook. It also provides other settings for you to have control over what type of YouTube activities you want to share. Let us see another example. Foursquare too provides a similar option for its users to share their locations on Facebook and Twitter. So, connection of profiles across social networks is a very prominent and common feature. Now, since people connect their profiles across social networks, there's information flow from one network to the other. Here's a Facebook post by Joshua Topolsky, a famous American technology journalist. If you observe closely, beneath the post, it reads, @Joshua Topolsky on Twitter via Twitter. This Facebook post was not typed on Facebook but on Twitter, and because Joshua has connected his Twitter account to his Facebook account, his posts on Twitter are directed to Facebook. On the bottom left of the slide, you can see a Twitter icon, an arrow, and a Facebook icon. This indicates that the information is flowing from Twitter to Facebook. I will discreetly use this notation throughout my presentation to indicate flow from one network to the other. Let us look at another example of information flow from one network to the other, or cross-syndication. Here's another example of cross-syndication. This post on Twitter or tweet hasn't generated from Twitter but rather from Foursquare, because Lorraine has connected her Foursquare account to her Twitter account. If you look closely, you will see via Foursquare written in gray on the bottom of this tweet. These examples aren't exceptions but rules. Users connect their profiles across social networks to enhance their social experience. Here are some official numbers on cross-syndication from YouTube. 700 YouTube videos per minute are shared on Twitter. 500 years of YouTube video has been watched on Facebook. I haven't seen official numbers from other social networks, but prior literature and statistics clearly suggest that sharing across networks is a phenomenon. Our research aim is to detect and connect profiles across social networks. For example, in the previous tweet, can I connect Lauren's Foursquare profile to her Twitter profile? Here are a couple of application scenarios. User data privacy and digital media marketing. Let us look into both of these one by one. If a system could connect a user's profile across social networks, it could gain more insight into the user's activities on social media. This system could find out a particular user's traces or footprints on the internet. Also, different social networks may ask for various personal information while signing up. If these social network profiles are linked, an adversary could gather information from these profiles and use it maliciously. The user, however, hasn't provided the information of a linked profiles in public, and hence any leak of such information could be entirely unintended and unnoticed. Let us look at an example. Here, Dom Cobb has signed up on various social networks like Twitter, Facebook, Last.fm, YouTube, and Foursquare. He even has different usernames. While signing up, he has provided the respective social networks with different personal information. Submitting some personal information is mandatory on most popular social networks. Now, if we look at Dom Cobb's Facebook profile in itself, we may not know about Dom's relationship status and his location. However, if you can connect Dom's Facebook profile to his Foursquare and YouTube profile, you would get to know his location and relationship status. The situation is not that dull. Linking profiles across networks can be very beneficial for digital marketing. It could provide more customer data for businesses. This can help marketing departments to understand their customer user base and to chalk out digital marketing roadmaps. Such data can also immensely help in targeted and contextual advertising too. Here's an example. It's the same example which we saw earlier, and I'm going to keep coming back to this slide throughout my presentation. This may look like just another tweet, but it's not. From this tweet, we can infer a lot of things about Lauren. For starters, Lauren loves grande iced coffee. However, she doesn't quite like classic iced coffee. She has visited Starbucks, and just not any Starbucks, but the one at 40W Lake Street, Chicago, Illinois. So, such information can be great for both Starbucks and Starbucks competitors. If there are a lot of tweets about Starbucks customers unable to order their drinks correctly, like Lorraine, then probably there are some problems in their menu, services, or somewhere else. Opportunistic competitors can also woo such customers by offering them generous discounts and make them visit their coffee shops. With respect to our research aim of connecting profiles across social networks, we performed a literature survey in this research space. We synthesized the existing work and categorized it into three types: profile information based methods, social network information based methods, and folksonomy information based methods. Profile information based methods make use of profile information like your name, email address, and usernames to connect profiles across social networks. However, depending on profile information has certain issues. First, since it is based on profile information, these methods wouldn't work well when less or no such information is present. Second, these methods are sensitive to conflicting information. For example, if a user has different names or relationship status on his profiles across two social networks, these approaches may have a problem. Finally, these solutions also involve a lot of guesswork. Network information based methods rely on the graph or the network of the user. For example, one of these methods checks for overlapping list of friends to connect profiles across social networks. However, these methods have their own limitations. First, social graphs may always not be publicly available. Second, due to the rise of niche social networks, my friend list may not overlap. For example, I have less than 30% overlap of friends on Twitter and LinkedIn. Folksonomy-based methods exploit tag distribution of users. The idea lies that users tend to use similar tags and therefore tag distributions are signatures of a user. So, if a user has similar tag distributions across networks, they are likely to be the same. These methods heavily rely on tag information which aren't always available. For example, Twitter and Facebook don't have tags. In summary, existing methods in literature have the following limitations. They require at least some amount of prediction or guesswork. These methods are computationally expensive, and this makes it infeasible to deploy these solutions in real time. I will now provide an intuition of a solution approach. Let's once again get back to my favorite example. A tweet by Lauren generated from Foursquare. There are two things to be noted here. First, the content of the tweet is not typed on Twitter but on Foursquare. Lauren has connected her Foursquare account to a Twitter account, which then automatically posts the content from Foursquare to Twitter. Second, the URL in the tweet is a direct link to Lauren's Foursquare profile. As you can see from the screenshot, when you open up the link, you will see Lauren's Foursquare check-in at Starbucks. Also note how the text on the Foursquare profile is exactly same as that on Twitter. Coincidence? Not really. This clearly shows that we could use such tweets to link external social network profiles on Twitter. Based on our intuition, let us now take a dive into our solution approach. Our solution approach consists of three steps. Step 1, filter. Step 2, extract. And step 3, connect. Let us look into each of these steps one by one. The first step is filter. Not all tweets generated on Twitter originate from an external social network. However, tweets which are generated from an external social network have certain textual patterns. We seek to find out these text patterns in the tweets to filter the ones for our interest. Let's get back to my favorite Lauren example. As you can see, the best textual pattern to identify such tweets is to look at short URLs, namely for sq.com and the source from which it is generated. Here's another example from YouTube, and again we see the same pattern. A short URL and a source. Since these tweets are nothing but a feed of activities from other social networks, we will call these patterns as activity feeds. After careful observation of such activity feed patterns in tweets, we construct queries for each social network as shown in the table. We then query the Twitter Search API with these as input. We want to be sure that these tweets are generated from the same user's external social network profile, and therefore we adopt a conservative approach. So, we now have the first step in a solution approach, that is, filter, as you can see in the system architecture diagram. The next step in a solution approach is extract. This step contains two further substeps, viz. URL extract and URL expand. The extract step takes in input the tweets generated from the filter step. The first sub-step, that is URL extract, processes the tweets and extracts the URL from the tweet. The next sub-step, URL expand, expands the short URL. It is to be noted that all our tweets would contain short URLs as Twitter wraps all URLs into short URLs. The output from this step with an example can be seen in the system architecture diagram. The third and final step of our solution approach is connect. In this step, the username is extracted from the expanded URL obtained from the previous step. We then query the respective social network API to get other information and link the user's Twitter profile to an external social network. The system architecture is now complete and we can see all the three steps in pipeline. After going through our system architecture, we will get the following information from Mr. Dom Cobb. This would happen only if Dom Cobb is connected his Twitter profile to other social networks. However, it is important to note that the information about Dom Cobb and his multiple social network profiles are not publicly available. We now describe our experimental setup. We use the Twitter search REST API to collect tweets. These tweets are publicly available and can be accessed by anyone. These tweets were collected for the complete month of December in 2011. Since we don't have any control over the tweets generated, this dataset is a random sample and hence unbiased. After applying the filter step, we obtain the following number of tweets for each social network. YouTube contains the least amount of tweets, while Flickr, Foursquare, and Last.fm contain similar numbers. Let me get back to my favorite example for a brief moment. As we saw earlier, a tweet contains a source from which it was generated, like the web interface or an external social network. In this case, the tweet is generated from an external social network which is nothing but an activity feed. We analyze the sources of tweets in a dataset after the filter step and we find that majority of the tweets are activity feeds. A small percentage of tweets are generated from other avenues like mobile clients and desktop clients, but these tweets also match the textual patterns. Hence, we consider them for the next step. We now extract the username or a unique identifier from the URL. As we can see, only YouTube doesn't contain a username in its URL. It however contains a video ID and we extract the video ID first and later get the username via the YouTube API. Finally, we connect these Twitter profiles to external social networks. The table shows the unique number of Twitter users mapped to external social networks. You might have observed the introduction of Facebook out of the blue. However, it is not so out of the blue. We see that the Foursquare API provides us information about users who have connected their profiles to Facebook. Therefore, if a user has connected his Foursquare account to both Facebook and Twitter, we can map such a user across all three networks. As can be seen from the table, we find high number of Foursquare and YouTube users connecting their accounts to Twitter. This stems from the fact that people on Twitter want to share their location as well as videos, but Twitter provides no such feature. Overall, we were able to map more than 69,000 Twitter profiles to other networks. We also find users connected across more than two networks. The table shows some numbers. We find 17,000 plus users who were connected across three networks and just 97 users who were connected to four networks. Majority of users were only connected to two networks. We now discuss our results and present our analysis. Normalized attribute leakage is a metric proposed by Irani et al. To quantify the unintended personally identifiable information or PII leakage. Recall that one of the side effects of linking social network profiles was user data privacy. Normalized attribute leakage calculates the number of users who leak the particular attribute in a dataset. The graph here shows the normalized attribute leakage for some personally identifiable attributes. The green bar indicates the attribute leakage levels before the profiles were mapped, and the orange bar indicates attribute leakage levels after the profiles were mapped. Certain attributes like gender, age, location, school, occupation, and relationship status appear only after profile mapping. Even on attributes which have high leakage levels before mapping, there's an increase in levels after the profiles are mapped. Name and location are some examples. This clearly shows that our approach is able to extract personal information attributes of users. A few approaches in literature use usernames to map profiles across social networks. The intuition is that users tend to use common usernames across social networks. We analyze the usernames in our dataset across social network profiles. We observe that people tend to have common usernames on Foursquare and Twitter. However, the percentage of common usernames on other social networks is on the lower side. Overall, 33% of Twitter users don't have the same username across other social networks. We observed another phenomena on Twitter. We see that a lot of Twitter users have multiple accounts on Twitter, mostly separated for professional and personal use. Here's an example. Melina has two Twitter accounts and has also explicitly posted a tweet explaining the same. We notice that these users, however, don't create multiple accounts on external social networks. For example, in this case, Melina uses the same Flickr account to link to both her Twitter profiles. As a result, we are able to link both her Twitter accounts to her Flickr profile and eventually identify that she has two accounts on Twitter. Duplicate profile detection on social networks is an active area of research and of interest to various researchers around the world. Our The table shows the duplicate profiles detected from each social network. From our dataset, 0.5% of the users had duplicate profiles. This may seem a small number from the look of it, but putting it in context of the number of users who have duplicate profiles makes this number very good, especially since duplicate profile detection wasn't even our main aim in the first place. We evaluate our system against a benchmark. FlipTop is a leading social identity mapping service on the internet. In order to make the comparison fair, we evaluate the Twitter usernames in our database via FlipTop API. FlipTop performs lower than our approach on all social networks. While we can't make an assertion that we are better than FlipTop, we can posit that our approach makes optimal use of the information available on Twitter without being computationally expensive. We have also developed a web application to demonstrate the efficacy of our approach. The application is available online at whackyapp.appspot.com. We welcome you to try this application. It must be noted that we do not store any information about our visiting users. This is a screenshot of our web application. It just takes 3 clicks for us to link your profile if available. Our contribution is as follows. We have proposed a new approach to detect social network profiles across multiple networks by exploiting activity feed sharing patterns. This is also the first focus study on social profile identity mapping on Twitter. So let's back up to the start and compare our approach against the limitation of existing approaches. The existing approaches require guesswork, are computationally expensive, and are infeasible to deploy. In contrast, our solution approach requires no guesswork, but we give ourselves a gray because we adopt a conservative approach and can map only some social profiles. Our approach is computationally cheap and we get a green here. Our approach is easy to deploy as demonstrated by our web application, so we get a green here too. Here are some advantages and disadvantages of a solution approach. Our system is computationally cheap and elegant in the sense to understand. Our system requires no manual evaluation and is 100% accurate. Recall that we map only those profiles which match the activity feed patterns. These mappings are 100% true positive and hence no manual evaluation is required. Our solution is easily scalable to any network as it is cheap. Finally, our solution approach is not specific to Twitter, but any network which has activity feed patterns in them. Ironically, this is a limitation as well. It will only work on networks which have activity feed sharing patterns. So today we have discussed how we can use activity feed sharing patterns to map social network profiles across networks. A solution is cheap, scalable, elegant, 100% accurate, but conservative. Thank you for attending this session. Please feel free to ask any questions over email or message me on Twitter. My details are on the current slide. I will open the floor for questions now.